I sat in the corner of the living room, wrapped in a blanket, my IV bag still hooked to the chair, the slow, rhythmic drip a cruel reminder of the body I could no longer control. Christmas lights blinked cheerfully on the tree. The scent of cinnamon rolls filled the air, and across the room my mother laughed, loud, sharp, right after calling me the laziest girl on earth. They thought I was asleep. Tom, my stepdad, chuckled. She's been milking this for months. Doesn't even try to help decorate anymore. My half-sister Emily added, honestly, if I laid around all day hooked to a machine, I'd be depressed, too. Like try moving a little, maybe? I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the gift I hadn't opened yet, hands limp in my lap. Inside the box, I already knew, was another cardigan I'd never wear, because they didn't know me. They only saw what they wanted to, a burden, a problem, a performance. The humiliation wasn't new, but the timing, the irony, that hit differently, because just 12 hours earlier, I'd been in the ER. My blood pressure had crashed. I needed fluids. I begged the nurses to discharge me that night so I wouldn't ruin Christmas. And now, here I was. IV still taped to my arm. Still, trying to be part of the family. He thought I wouldn't hear. She thought I couldn't respond. But I was there, fully conscious, fully aware of every word they spat behind their polite holiday smiles. And that's when everything changed. Because this wasn't heartbreak. It was awakening. I used to think love meant enduring pain in silence. That family meant unconditional acceptance, no matter how much it hurt. But that morning, sitting next to a machine keeping me upright, I realized something else. They weren't family. They were spectators in my suffering. And worse, they enjoyed the show. I watched Emily unwrap her gift, shrieking with joy over a designer handbag. Grace beamed at her, pride in her eyes. Then she glanced at me, expression flat, bored, impatient, like she was wondering how long I'd keep dragging this act out. I gripped the edge of the chair to steady myself. The IV line tugged slightly as I adjusted my weight. That pain, that was real. Unlike their empathy, I wanted to scream, to tear down the tree, to throw my wrapped box of nothing through the window. But I didn't. I just smiled, because they had no idea I heard everything. And now I was done pretending. I used to love Christmas. The magic, the lights, the way the house smelled like vanilla and pine. When I was little, Grace, back when I still called her Mom, used to braid my hair the night before, tuck me in under flannel sheets, and promise that Santa would come. I believed her. I believed in everything back then, including her love. But things started shifting when I got sick. It didn't happen all at once. Chronic illnesses rarely do. It crept in like fog. First fatigue, then nausea, then the kind of bone-deep pain that makes you afraid to wake up. I went from running track to barely climbing stairs in less than a year. The doctors were confused. The diagnosis came slowly. Dysautonomia, chronic fatigue syndrome, and something autoimmune they still couldn't pin down. Grace didn't take it well. At first, she was sympathetic. Appointments, vitamins, holistic remedies. But when nothing fixed me fast enough, her sympathy hardened into suspicion. She started sighing more, asking, "Are you sure you can't come downstairs?" Or worse, "You were fine yesterday." Tom followed her lead. He never tried to understand, just rolled. His eyes made jokes. "Must be nice living in pajamas. Do you think maybe a jog would clear that up?" He thought he was funny. He wasn't. And Emily, she just stopped speaking to me unless it was to mock something. "Why are you so pale? How come you get out of chores? Is this one of your episodes?" Her favorite phrase was, "Here we go again." But I still showed up, Every Christmas, every birthday, every family gathering. I smiled through the migraines. I hid in the bathroom during flares. I brought store-bought cookies when I couldn't bake and apologized like it was a crime. I wanted to believe love would return if I just tried harder. I remember the year I fainted during dinner. Tom called it a melodramatic exit. Grace made me clean up the spilled gravy the next day. Emily laughed. At least she gave us something to talk about. And still, I stayed. I stayed because I was afraid. Afraid of being alone. Afraid they were right. That maybe I was just lazy, dramatic, unworthy. It's amazing what shame can make you accept. But deep inside, a part of me always knew. If my illness was visible, if I had wires or scars or bandages, they'd treat me differently. It was the invisibility that gave them permission to doubt me. And now, on this Christmas morning, with an IV literally in my vein, they still laughed. And for the first time, I stopped making excuses for them. Looking back, I see the signs were always there. The dismissive glances, the long silences after I explained symptoms, the way Grace's face would tighten every time I needed to sit instead of stand. But I ignored them. I was trained to. When you grow up being praised for being easy, you learn to stay quiet, even in pain. One year, I missed Emily's graduation party because I was in the hospital. Grace didn't visit. Tom sent a text. Timing, huh? Emily didn't speak to me for months. Later, she told people I bailed because I didn't want to be upstaged. I cried for 2 days and still sent her a gift. Another time, I overheard Grace on the phone with her sister. It's like she wants to be sick, she said. She thrives on the attention. I sat in the hallway, knees pressed to my chest, listening to the woman who raised me rewrite my pain into manipulation. Ressentimento built slowly. I'd try to share my struggles, only to be met with rolled eyes or worse, competitive suffering. Grace would say, "We're all tired." Tom would groan, "Try working a real job." Emily would say, "Some of us don't have time to nap all day." There were times they forgot I existed. They'd plan family outings, dinners, vacations, and leave me off the group text. When I'd find out and ask, they'd say, "We didn't think you'd feel up to it." Translation: we didn't want your illness around. I began to anticipate their disappointment before I even opened my mouth. I'd rehearse how to say, "I'm not feeling well today," in a way that sounded apologetic, enough to soften their anger. But it never worked. Grace would sigh. Tom would leave the room. Emily would text someone and laugh behind her phone. Once, I was so desperate to prove I wasn't faking that I filmed myself during a flare, shaking, crying, unable to lift a cup of water. I showed it to Grace. She stared at the screen and said, "That's disturbing. Why would you record that?" I deleted it. They never asked about my doctors, never remembered the names of my medications, but they remembered every time I ruined a holiday, every time I cried, every time I fell apart. I internalized it. Thought maybe I was the problem. That maybe, if I were stronger or braver or better at pretending, I'd be worthy of their love. So I became quieter, smaller, invisible. But invisibility didn't protect me. It just made their cruelty louder. Christmas morning was supposed to be warm, gentle, safe. Instead, I sat there, listening to my own mother call me a burden while I was still hooked up to an IV. The fluid line shimmered in the twinkling lights like a cruel joke. Proof of my reality, mocked by those who claimed to love me. Emily's laughter was the worst. It wasn't just casual, it was vicious. You'd think she'd at least comb her hair before coming down. She snorted, loud enough for me to hear from across the room. Grace didn't correct her. Tom added, "It's hard work being helpless." They all laughed, and I sat there, breathing slowly through the nausea, through the ache in my joints, through the pulse in my skull. I stared at the fire burning in the fireplace and thought, this is what betrayal looks like when it's dressed in family sweaters and cinnamon rolls. The humiliation clung to my skin like sweat. I felt myself shrinking into the chair, not because I was weak, but because I was done trying to stand in a room full of people who delighted in watching me fall. At one point, Grace walked over, handed me a gift bag without looking at me. Thought, you might want something cozy, she said. Inside was a bathrobe, size XL. I wear a small. It felt like a costume, a cover-up, a metaphor. I looked up at her, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't see a mother. I saw a woman who couldn't stand to have a daughter who wasn't perfect, who couldn't mold me into the polished image she held of success. So she chose to belittle me instead. When the family photo was taken, Grace didn't ask me to join. I sat 10 feet away, holding my IV pole like a torch no one wanted to see. I watched them pose, smile, laugh, like I was the ghost haunting the edges of their perfect holiday. Tom turned and said, "Want us to wheel you in?" Another laugh. Emily said, "Don't worry, we'll Photoshop her in later. Make her look awake." That's when I stood up. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I just slowly, painfully stood, every muscle trembling, and walked out of the room. No one followed. No one called after me. They just went back to their gifts, their games, their day. Upstairs, I collapsed on my bed, tears finally spilling over. Not because of the pain, but because they chose this. They chose to see me as weak, lazy, dramatic. They chose to ignore the tubes, the fatigue, the fear I carry every day. They didn't break me. They abandoned me. And that's a betrayal no gift can cover. I lay in bed that Christmas night, the glow of the tree lights still flickering downstairs, casting shadows through the hallway like ghosts of every unspoken word. My body throbbed with exhaustion, but I couldn't sleep. I couldn't breathe, without hearing their laughter replay in my mind, over and over like a cruel loop. The IV bag had run dry. I didn't have the strength to disconnect it. I just sat there, tethered to the chair like a prisoner in my own home. The house was quiet now, except for the occasional burst of laughter from a movie Tom was watching. They'd moved on. I hadn't. My phone buzzed. A text from Grace. "Try to be more present tomorrow. Everyone's doing their best." I stared at the words, rage pulsing in my fingertips. Present? I was right there when they mocked me. I had heard every word while they looked. Right past me, I started to reply, then stopped. What was the point? Every time I tried to explain, she twisted it. Accused me of being oversensitive, of starting drama. She'd say I was ruining the mood, like my illness was a character flaw, like my existence was an inconvenience. So, I typed something else, something I hadn't said in years. "You hurt me today." I stared at the screen, hovered over send, then deleted it because I knew what she'd say. "That's not what I meant." Or worse, "Don't be so dramatic." And I didn't have the energy to be gaslit again. Instead, I grabbed my journal. I wrote until my hand cramped. I poured every thought onto paper, every insult, every missed moment, every ounce of disappointment. I wrote until the anger stopped boiling and started settling, not into peace, but into something sharper, clearer. Dr. Patel had told me once, "You don't have to stay where your pain is minimized." I hadn't understood what she meant until now. I thought family was forever, that blood required loyalty. But loyalty without respect is just servitude. That night, I made a list, not of resolutions, but of truths. Truth. I am sick, but not weak. Truth. I am not lazy. I am surviving. Truth. They do not see me because they choose not to. And the last one, I do not owe them my silence anymore. I fell asleep holding that page, tears crusting at the corners of my eyes. They thought I was fragile, but they were wrong. I was just beginning to wake up. 2 days after Christmas, I asked Grace to drive me to my follow-up appointment. She hesitated, said she had errands. I didn't push. I called Nina instead, my best friend, my lifeline. She showed up with hot tea and soft music in the car. No questions, just care. The contrast was so sharp, it made my throat ache. Dr. Patel greeted me with the same kindness she always did. She checked my vitals, reviewed my lab work, asked how I was managing, and for once, I told the truth. Not just about the pain, but about the house. The comments, the silence, the mockery. Her face didn't flinch. She just nodded slowly and said, "That's emotional abuse." Hearing those words out loud made my chest tighten. You've normalized mistreatment because it's all you've ever known. That doesn't make it okay. It just means you're overdue for peace. I sat in her office, IV line dangling from my port, tears slipping down without permission. She handed me tissues, waited, then asked, "Do you want help setting boundaries?" My head nodded before I even had time to think. She recommended a therapist, one familiar with chronic illness and family trauma. I made the call that afternoon. It felt like the first real act of care I'd given myself in years. Back home, I started watching, listening. Not just to what they said, but how often they didn't see me. Tom asking Emily to pass the salt when I was sitting closer. Grace talking about her girls and only mentioning Emily. Emily venting about how some people fake being sick for attention. Her eyes flicking toward me. The anger I'd swallowed began to rise in waves, not chaotic, but purposeful. Like my body was finally remembering how to defend itself. I pulled out old medical files, reread my diagnoses, my test results. I reminded myself that I wasn't imagining this, that my illness wasn't fiction, that every symptom had been documented, measured, recorded. I found texts Grace had sent to relatives calling my condition overblown and psychosomatic. She even told Aunt Rachel I refused to get better because I liked being taken care of. That was the moment I stopped calling her mom in my mind. She was just Grace now. I asked Nina, "Do you think I'm exaggerating?" She looked at me with steady eyes and said, "If you were bleeding, they'd hand you a towel and call it drama. This isn't on you. This is what happens when people can't handle what they don't understand." For the first time, I let the truth sit in my chest without shame. They didn't just fail me. They refused to try. Vengeance wasn't about yelling. It wasn't slamming doors or shouting matches that never end. It was clarity, calm, choosing myself so loudly they had no choice but to listen or leave. I didn't want to destroy them. I just wanted freedom from pretending. I started by setting a boundary, out loud, during breakfast. I looked at Grace, Tom, and Emily and said, "No more jokes about my illness. No more dismissing my symptoms. If it happens again, I leave." The silence that followed was thicker than butter. Tom laughed. Grace blinked. Emily rolled her eyes, but I didn't flinch. That night, I sent them each a message. A list of things I wouldn't tolerate anymore. Gaslighting, mockery, exclusion. I explained that my condition was real, documented, and exhausting. That I didn't owe them strength to be respected. That I was done shrinking to fit their comfort. Grace texted back, "You're being very dramatic." I didn't reply. The next week, I packed a small suitcase and moved in with Nina for a while. I didn't announce it. I didn't explain. I just left a note on my bed. "You've made this house unbearable. I'm choosing peace." The first Few days felt foreign, like I was learning to breathe differently. But Nina's apartment was warm, quiet, filled with small kindnesses. She kept soup stocked in the fridge, made sure my meds were on schedule, and let me cry without solving it. I told Dr. Patel what I'd done. She smiled. "That's not rebellion," she said. "That's healing." One afternoon, I posted a thread online about chronic illness, invisible pain, and the way families sometimes become battlegrounds. It wasn't angry, just honest. It went viral. Hundreds of comments from people saying, "Me too. Thank you." I thought I was alone. Emily screenshotted it and sent it to me. "Really? You're airing family stuff online?" I replied, "It stopped being family stuff when you made me the punchline." Grace didn't reach out. Tom sent a one-line email. "Hope you're feeling better." It wasn't concern. It was avoidance. I didn't respond. I was done, performing for their comfort. The final step? I changed my emergency contact from Grace to Nina, and for the first time, I felt safe. Because power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just choosing your own name, your own voice, your own damn peace. I wake up now without bracing for a comment, without scanning for sarcasm. The air feels different in Nina's apartment, lighter, honest. There's no IV bag today, but if there were, she wouldn't call me lazy. She'd ask if I needed more tea. That's what love looks like when it's real. The silence in this space is healing, not hostile. I move slowly, still in pain most days, still sick, but I no longer feel invalid. I feel seen. Every breath I take without apology is a rebellion against years of being made small. I've started therapy regularly. The sessions are hard, emotional, sometimes brutal. But I'm unpacking decades of damage. I'm learning that you can grieve a mother who's still alive. That blood isn't the same as bond. That choosing distance can be an act of survival. I began painting again. It started as a way to cope. Now it's become a way to speak. I've sold 2 pieces. One of them was called The Chair, a stark image of me on Christmas morning, IV line glowing under fairy lights. Raw, real, and mine. Grace hasn't contacted me since I left. Emily posted a vague quote about betrayal on Instagram. Tom blocked me. That used to scare me. Now it frees me. I am no longer tethered to their expectations. I owe them nothing, not even my silence. Instead, I speak, I write, I educate. I share my story with others fighting invisible battles. And every time someone says, "I thought I was the only one," I know I'm doing something that matters. In what would have been our next family holiday? I stayed in bed late, ate pancakes Nina made from scratch, and watched the snow fall. I didn't flinch when I saw the date. I didn't cry when the memories came. I just let them move through me like waves, real, but passing. Because I am not a victim. I am a survivor of emotional abuse, gaslighting, medical invalidation, and I'm still here. And now, when I hear the word lazy, I don't shrink. I laugh. Because I know what I survived, and no one who hasn't walked in my body has earned the right to define it.